Hello friends! On this channel we are nothing if not transparent about the writing process. And today I'm going to take you along on my first discussion with my editor after her review of A Time When Demons. Today's video is going to be a conversation which you all get to be a fly on the wall for. If you haven't worked with an editor previously, this will give you a bit of insight into what it's like. My guest today is Pamela Cat Johnson.
Hello.
She is a writer and illustrator herself, but also a professional editor. Oh, and she's my mom, but that doesn't really play a role in how she edits my work, right?
Right.
So let's talk about you for a minute.
Okay, sure.
Tell me about your history with editing.
I got seriously into editing about 10 years ago when I lived in Winnipeg. At that time, I was strictly a writer and thought that I could improve my writing by learning some of the editing process. I ended up taking most of the courses offered by the Manitoba Editors Association and also became their president for a couple of years. Through this route, I learned quite a bit about the intricacies of editing, beyond simply correcting spelling and grammar. Copy editing and proofreading are one thing and can be pretty easily taught and learned if you have an interest and aptitude for it, which means having an insane focus for detail and nuance and the ability to sit all by yourself in front of a screen for hours thinking about syntax. Substantive editing goes quite a bit further. And I learned about that through some intensive workshops with Marjorie Anderson, editor to the late Carol Shields. Through Marjorie's influence, I learned that this type of editing requires building a true relationship with the writer, being their cheerleader and sometimes their confidant, even their therapist at times.
Of course.
To some extent. You're helping this sometimes vulnerable person birth their creative project into the world. And it's a different approach every time, depending on the personality of the writer. The idea is to help them shape the story that they want to create, give suggestions through the tangled and difficult parts without taking it over and doing it for them.
Right.
Or bullying them into making something that they never intended. But many editors are essentially ghostwriters who do virtually all the writing and make quite a career of this with clients who will pay to anything to get their name on the cover of a book.
Wow.
Well, it's something I could never bring myself to do.
No.
If I'm going to write a book, I want my name on the cover.
Agreed.
But they might be making more money doing what they're doing.
I guess if that's what you're in it for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what we are going to be looking at today is the manuscript that I wrote last NaNoWriMo, which is titled A Time When Demons. I haven't touched this or looked at it in a while, and my mom edited it for her NaNoWriMo this time around while I was writing yet another draft that you're gonna have to edit at some point,
Right.
I hope. What we'll go through is just roughly what it was like on your end editing, and then I'm gonna take my first look at her edits because I haven't looked at them at all. So you're gonna get the unfiltered first reaction here to the changes that she suggests that I make, and we'll see what that's like. So what was your editing process like in the past month? We didn't really talk a lot about that as you were going through it.
Well, editing you is actually quite an easy process for me. And it's a joy for me to do because you have found your writing voice.
And I just was saying that you being my mom didn't play a role in this, but now it sounds like it does.
Well,
I'll take the compliment.
It might help that I know you well, but no, like as far as voice goes, you have, like, nobody can do that for you. You've come to that, and it just makes everything flow, and it makes it consistent. It sounds right. It sounds believable. So I seldom find a discordant note in your writing, in your manuscript, and that's the first thing I look for during my first perusal of the manuscript of the book.
I think when I'm writing, I'm pretty obsessive about, like, there's this thing in my head and I don't know how to describe it, and maybe it is my writer's voice. Just if I read over something or listen to it, especially anything that sounds slightly off and like doesn't sound like me, I get rid of it. So I don't know, maybe that's part of the consistency. Like that's a lot of what I'm doing on my first edits. Oh, and by the way, this draft I did 2 edits on before sending to her.
Oh yeah, okay. You could see that. Really, like my work was it wasn't that much for me to do.
It was not fresh from NaNoWriMo.
Right.
Because
okay.
that first draft is definitely more of a mess.
You know, that makes me feel better because I was thinking that you were a little bit too great at this. Also, you write very effective, fluid, and believable dialogue for your characters.
It's because of the voices in my head.
It's key to the story's vitality. It keeps everything humming along. And when you underpin this with a good plot line, which you're also very good at, you're 75% of the way there. So I'm not just saying that because I'm your mom. That's what I find with editing your work.
Well, I mean, we'll see when other people start reading my stuff if you're correct, right?
Right. But just for your audience to know, this is like for Holly not to hear. The main sticking points for Holly are 1 or 2 specific grammatical errors.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this
They
before.
crop up regularly, and some misplaced quotation marks. I believe she finally knows where to use the word lead, L-E-D, as opposed to lead, L-E-A-D. A mental block which I surgically removed from her head over a period of several years. So
yeah, I was actually just going back through some of my old writing. I'm preparing for a convention and going back to Sinterra and Eternity, these like way older pieces that I haven't really talked about on my channel, and just the amount of that. And also, like, I did not know how to mix dialogue into a paragraph. I always would put it on separate lines, which made things really messy. And I was just going back through it like over the past few days going like, Holly, why?
And one other thing is your kind of habitual usage of him and I rather than him and me, but just a mere technicality, really.
She corrects me on that one in real life all the time.
Well, I would do that even if I weren't your editor.
Yeah, I know.
That would be a mom thing.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I guess we can start getting into the actual edit. And I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers as we do this, so you can still read the book when it's out in the world and not feel like it's been ruined by this video. Okay, so I've found this part here where my main character, Eris, is with her friends at the bar, and they are making eye contact with the bartender to get their regular drinks. So what you've highlighted is making eye contact with the tender immediately, the woman swanned over and greeted them all. She knew her regulars and what they were bound to order. And the note we've got is, rework this highlighted sentence. Making eye contact with the woman is a clause which is modified by the woman. This means that the woman made eye contact with the bartender, yet the woman is the bartender. You want to say that Eris made eye contact with the bartender? Yes? Yes, I did. Now let me...
So I'm sorry, that's probably about as confusing a note as there will be in the entire manuscript, but
I'm looking at making eye contact with a tender, the woman.
Okay,
I see what you mean.
So is the woman Eris, or is the woman
because I've
the
referred
bartender?
to her as the tender, but then there's also the woman when we were talking about a woman prior. So I see what you mean.
One thing you do quite a lot is you'll say making eye contact with, which presumes the character, the I character.
Yeah.
Or, but then you go into a clause that refers to someone else.
Right.
So this is something
I usually assume that people know exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay. Could be a problem for a writer. The whole idea is to explain what you're thinking. So, okay.
So I would agree with this one. I'm probably going to agree on everything that she has suggested. I'm also very, very open to critique. I can see how some other writers, if you were to work with them, might fight you all the way on everything because of their style. I know there are some writers out there who even refuse to work with editors, which I can't imagine doing. I don't know.
It's not a good idea.
Yeah,
it's not a good idea because, for one thing, you really need that second pair of eyes, because the editor doesn't have in their mind what you have. And you may not realize you haven't given enough information, say at the beginning of the story. Sometimes after you've done the whole first draft, which is important because you get everything out there, and and there's an immediacy to it and usually a continuity. But it could be that you need more information at the beginning in order to pick up what's going to happen later. And as the writer, you've gone through it a lot and you know the story.
You also kind of forget the story in a way. I find, again, in reviewing my old writing to make samples of it, the older stuff just reads so well. It's so great because it doesn't feel familiar. And once the story starts feeling familiar and you're repeating it over and over and over in your head, you get lost in it and you kind of forget what's going on and you just go on autopilot. And like I would not be able to edit it immediately after I finished it or anything like that because it's just like bleh in my head.
And one thing to be aware of is that editors who write, they all use editors. You'd think, oh, you can edit your own work. Well, you can to some degree, but you really need somebody or two different editors to go through it and find the plot holes, find what could be changed, bring some freshness to it, maybe ask you some questions that you hadn't considered before.
And that's why beta readers are important too, if you can get a hold of them, so that you have someone who's not necessarily looking through the editor lens, but just the reader and knowing what other people are going to think. Because if you think something is going to be amazing, that it doesn't guarantee that everyone else is going to think it's going to be amazing.
And I find that if you have beta readers, if you get a lot of criticism, but it's all over the map, you can safely maybe ignore some of that or just tuck it away. But if you see that these beta readers are all kind of saying the same thing, you should pay attention. If you get the same critique 2 or 3, say 3 times, you need to do something about that part of your writing, probably.
Yeah. And if it's the favorite thing that you wrote in your book, put it aside and use it in something else. You can always save it. You can always salvage it. You can always use that again. You haven't lost it.
Right.
All right, we're still in the bar.
We're still with the bartender.
We have a highlight. Heading to the bar for another drink, the tender from earlier served them again and paused to talk. So you have added, I have left this sentence, as is to show you that you are sometimes modifying your clauses incorrectly.
See, I'm a teacher too.
Yes, she is also a teacher. I.e., you have said here that the bartender is heading to the bar and then serving them again. I think you want this meaning. They headed to the bar for another drink, and the tender from earlier served them.
See, because heading to the bar for another drink...
Oh, yeah. Heading to the bar for another drink, served them again.
You're saying that the tender is heading to the bar, but it's not. It's the young women who are heading to the bar for another drink, right?
Yeah.
So, that's just a comment.
No, I get that. I get that.
All right. Okay.
And right after this, the bartender is speaking to them, and they're avoiding men at the bar, and the bartender suggests just once you might give them the time of day. And she has asked, who is saying this? The bartender? There's a lot of problems with this bartender.
Yeah, kind of.
I assume it is because she stalks off afterwards, but I think you need to identify her here or say it's one of the other girls. Yeah, it's the bartender. So they say, time's up, lads, to the boys, head to the bar, and then, I guess... But if I change that line beforehand, the tender from earlier served them, would that then make sense if she says once? Because I feel like I'm talking about the tender and then it leads into her saying that. So I feel like that would make sense.
You can deal with this problem in other ways than just sort of going in and changing 1 or 2 words in a sentence.
Yeah.
You can look at the holistic, like couple of paragraph before and after, and then just make an adjustment that flows well through the whole passage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I've scrolled a bit further to get us out of the bar. Now my characters are at a party.
The bar was pre-gaming.
They party a lot. They party a lot until some serious stuff happens and they stop partying. So I have, after greeting one of the other partygoers, his eyes scanned about the room, settling on hers. She felt the color rising in her complexion, but could not loose her gaze. So the comment here is about the word loose. And you have said, can't decide about the word loose here. I like it because it is more archaic than loosen, but it is in danger of being read as lose, which every pinhead these days thinks is the way to spell that word.
Maybe you shouldn't have said that.
No. We are a programmer and spelling channel here. We call it like it is.
But we don't call people pinheads.
No.
They must have been late at night when I said that. Or
I don't think I've ever heard you use the word pinhead.
Anyway, You get my meaning there. And the reason I like the archaic nature of it is because because the story is about people who live in an archaic way, like a family with a great tradition of esoteric and archaic stuff going on. So yeah, like that's.
So you don't mind it, but you would just worry about how.
I just don't know if people are going to know what that means.
I wouldn't worry about that, honestly. For me, that's not a concern, because if I'm using the word properly, then I would think of it as, if you don't understand it, it's a learning opportunity,
and
right?
usually I don't worry about that, because that's like not giving your readers the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
You don't write to the lowest common denominator. No. So you're absolutely right there, that you could go with what you like. Like that's just
I like it.
I like it. I'm going with it too.
So this is the point in the video where you're going to get actual decent audio, because my lovely microphone, which lit up and looked like it was working, was not working because it wasn't fully plugged in. It was only partially plugged in. So welcome to good audio land. All right, so we found another word concern, which is, I referred to Eris as a redhead earlier in the scene. And then I have called one of the police officers, Baker, I've referred to him as having a thick crop of red hair. So you have said, maybe choose a word like rusty colored or some other term for red. We just heard redhead used to describe Eris, and this makes an oddly intrusive connection between them, if only for a moment. And I totally agree on that one. So I would change that. And this is in the part that I was reading earlier, and I picked up on that too. So it's kind of interesting to see that listening back after a year, I was noticing some of the same things that you were noticing.
Oh, that's great.
Shortly after, we also have me mentioning that the police are saying tonight was going to be one for the OT books, and you have added, what is OT book, Old Testament? LOL. It's overtime. It's overtime books. In this novel, I actually spent a while researching police slang. And so you have the sweat box and stuff, which is the interrogation room, and I have some coded lingo where they'll be calling out like what's happening, and it's got a number in it or letters or something. So all of that, I researched it to use the appropriate language that these guys would actually be using.
10-4.
Okay. So after Eris has been dragged into the interrogation room and then removed from the interrogation room by her betrothed, she's thinking about how she wanted to tell the officer everything that just happened because of how his intentions seemed good, but she didn't have the chance to. So I've added that she was also not stupid, meaning she wasn't going to spill her guts about what did just happen because it would implicate her in some things. So your note was, maybe choose a different adjective here since she has just been berating herself for actually being stupid, perhaps, but she was no fool. So looking back, I guess, I remember what I was saying here. She was saying stupid Eris to herself or something.
And then you say, but she's not stupid.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. She's stupid, but she's not a fool.
Right.
I'll just include this one because it was just positive. It was just a positive little comment. Emrys, her betrothed, is driving her from the cop shop. I have, Emrys had been scolding her since the car doors shut, and she had been sullen, silent, head leaning against the glass and staring out at the early morning traffic going by. She could smell that the car had been freshly detailed. She hated that smell. And you added such a nice little detail here, by the way. I hate that smell, so it just sort of made sense to add in.
Yeah. And it speaks volumes to the type of person he is and the type of person she is.
Yeah.
Like you've taken like a deft little watercolor stroke and given us this whole picture of the two of them. So that's what I liked about it.
Oh, and again, right after this, we have, hey, Emrys snapped with his right hand in her face while they were stopped at a red. He's going like, hey, snapping. I can't snap, but... And you've added, perfect simple way to describe a complete asshole. Even though you said at one point that you liked Emrys.
I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes like assholes. I don't know.
Yeah, same.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Wonder where I got it from. We had another note, not with any specific part highlighted, where you've added, just a note, you are using a lot of semicolons, but not always the correct way. I have changed the wrong ones into commas, but you will be pleased to know that I have also added semicolons in several places where you have incorrectly used commas. We can discuss at your leisure, and I will explain how to decide which to use. I'm aware of this. I'm aware of this.
This is
I'm
such
aware of
this is such editor talk. Like we could spend a couple of hours discussing commas and semicolons as editors and how things go in and out of fashion and what makes good writing and which does not. It's just it's not for everyone.
But if she were to edit your works, you know that she would be very polite.
Yes. Words like pinhead and asshole probably wouldn't come into it at all.
Depends what kind of writer you are. I found another little compliment. Eris is talking about her experience being interrogated and having to call her parents and what happened when she called them. And I have her explaining her weekend, saying, I crashed through the weekend, wake up, and Vogue catalog is waiting in the atrium with a basque of cordon bleu pastries. And you've added such funny dialogue. Also, this was a good device to fast track the whole engagement process. And that's not a spoiler. There's an arranged engagement in this story that's a big concern throughout. So you've said rather than sticking in the expected things that would drag out this part of the story. Good work.
I believe in giving a star where it's earned.
So here we have a part where I over-described something, and I think I do that sometimes. You had mentioned that I did that with clothing and stuff. I over-described a bit. In this one, I've said they're in an art room, and I wrote, a circle of easels surrounded a wooden platform about 2 feet off the ground and 5 by 5 in size. And you've said, I think it would be sufficient to just say a raised wooden platform. Readers tend to know what an art studio with students and a model looks like. See, I wasn't too sure about that, though, because I know a lot of people who have never been in an art classroom, and a lot of the time when you see images of it, there isn't necessarily a platform. It's just sort of in the middle of the room. You're blinking at me, but I don't know. That's just what I was thinking.
Everyone has that image in mind.
Yeah, I don't know. When I say a wooden platform, I wouldn't know what size it was. Like, it's a room with a platform. I also think that I've drawn still lifes with like a smaller platform.
Even so, does that matter?
I don't know.
It's just a wooden platform with a model on it. Okay. Get on with the story.
Okay. So a lot of the edits are quite similar, as I'm finding, but here is one that I think doesn't really destroy the story if we talk about it, but there's a crucial point where someone who's not part of the world of magic finds out about it, and I've just said, it all came spilling out then, the magic, the world of Wiccas, what had happened those weeks before, and even Emrys, who is the betrothed. And your note said, I think you might flesh this out a bit rather than wrapping it up in just one sentence. What is in fact a crucial revelation feels a bit abrupt. It is not even perfectly clear that she is telling this to this person. It could almost be just explosive thoughts in her own mind. And I agree, this was definitely a shortcut.
Uh-huh.
This is a shortcut. I've done that sometimes when I just do not want to get into all of the details. And a lot of the time I'll go back and I'll fix it. I'll change it. But I guess I didn't go back and fix this one or change it, and it just...
Yeah, the shortcut earlier where you cut off out what could have been a lot of dead weight, explaining about the betrothal thing, that was good there.
Yeah.
This is like a more important key point.
Yeah.
To the story.
I have a way of writing, and I'm seeing this in Synterra, where I have a lot of really in-depth scenes and a lot that's happening, and the more that's happening, the less I want to write about it.
Oh yeah, you've had that before.
Which is funny, because we have Synterra, which is this big fantasy epic, which is between multiple POVs and everything like that, and the chapters are like 4 pages long. Each chapter, which I know that I need to change. And it's funny because I'm not good at writing short stories. But when I'm in a big story and there's detailed stuff, I become incredibly concise.
And Holly, you like to write about the characters you like.
I do. I was saying that in my live sprints yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going really fast because I'm writing about this character I like.
So sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can tell where, Holly's really into this character. Look at what color his shoelaces are. But
it's always the villains or the angsty boys.
Yeah, bad boys.
All right, we're actually nearing the end of this here, and there's a surprising few adjustments. But in this one, I have this sentence where He's leaning back in the chair, stretched his arms up and clasped his hands behind his neck in a relaxed stance. And you've added a note that I was not aware of, where you've said stance is a particular to standing, which makes sense. Not sitting in a chair, you need to choose a word such as position or way.
A stance could also be your opinion on something.
Yeah.
But in this case, you can't, you're not sitting in a relaxed stance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. I just thought of stance as any way you're sort of presenting yourself.
You need to read the dictionary and learn all the words.
Here I've written cam girl number who knows what, but I used the number sign and maybe I should have used the word number. Would that work better? Because you said the meaning of this is a bit unclear. It's
like a real person.
Some of the...
Oh, yeah.
They're victims in this story and they are sex workers, and so I've written... with Aidan Gallagher, it seemed maybe he could care. He had treated her like a real person after all, and not as she had felt with the other officer, cam girl number who knows what.
Yeah. What you're saying is that with the other officer, she felt like cam girl number who knows what.
Like she was just objectified by the other officer.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we could work on that sentence a little bit. You can still use most of your wording, but I think we can sharpen it up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have come to the end of the book. I left out some things that had spoilers and some stuff that was more repetitive than I already went through, but we are now aware that I have a continuous problem that I need to work on. And you have written a note at the end where I saw numbers because you've added the word count, and I thought you were giving me like a rating out of 10 or something. I was like, I get a rating? And that would have been very, very teacherly.
No, I won't go that far.
Instead, you have written, great work, Holly. An exciting story with complex, believable characters and a well-paced plotline. Stands on its own, but is perfectly poised for sequels. That was the goal. Mm-hmm. I was hoping that it could be one or the other, because I can always write more.
Yeah.
At just under 80,000 words, it is the correct length for this type of novel, also my goal. The draft was about 125 pages, the first draft. So that was the first draft, which I actually finished after NaNoWriMo. It took a couple weeks after. And so I edited, and then I added a whole bunch more pages, because this is about, 300, almost 300 pages. And then that's how I got the second draft, which I then did one more quick edit, and then it went to you. So you've added, it was a delight to do the initial scrutinizing. We'll need at least one more edit to catch whatever I may have missed. I have one suggestion. Remember Bodkin? Try bringing him back to round out your ending. He might be sleeping on the hearth or winding himself around the legs of the men in the sitting room as they drink their scotch. Or maybe he's sitting on the porch railing at the very end. Cheshire Cat grin on his little Ralph face. So that is what you thought of my novel. Mm-hmm. And it was way less harsh than I expected, which was nice. Though I am, of course, going to have beta readers as well to see what opinions are outside of editing and writer brains, get some people who maybe don't write as much, and some people who do write as well, just to see their opinions on it too.
Yeah, people who do that are treasures.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I think that this has been a really great look into the editing process, even though it was a little more painless than it is sometimes, and that might have been in part due to my tons of editing beforehand as well.
You've worked hard.
I have. It's what I do. It's what I do all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think we got through this without giving too many spoilers about the project. And thank you for being here with me today.
You're so welcome. It's nice to see you again.
Because we never see each other. And also thank you for spending your NaNoWriMo using this as your Rebel Rimo project.
Well, of course.
I'm really excited to take the next steps into just sitting down with this on my own, looking into all of the edits, making the changes that are required, adding, removing things, and at last getting into querying.
Excellent. Yeah. And I'm going to get into my own writing for a bit now. Yeah,
you better hurry with that because I'm going to have more stuff for you to edit soon.
I know.
And for all of you, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Discord community as well as my Patreon. The links are in the description below, as is Pamela's info, if you need an editor for your writing. Also,
this is a serious message to everybody watching my update right now.
Please note there will not be any Saturday sprint sessions now until January 15th.
Peace and love. Peace and love.
But a few will be happening on my Discord server still, so definitely join.
Thank you, thank you. Anyway, peace and love, peace and love.
And last but not least, I hope that you are having a day that is just as wonderful as you are. Bye.
Bye-bye.